Okay. Hi, everyone. Oh, it's so great to see so many old and new friends. It's really beautiful. And thank you to those who are there on Zoom. And I'm very, very happy that you're here. It's such a blessing to be here. So, okay, it's going to be really hard to keep it 20 minutes. I keep on practicing, making it shorter and shorter. There's so many stories. So I had to winnow it down by about a third. Some of you know that I used to do hospice work, and at the time, I didn't have many people in my life that had died. Isn't that ironic? And I was the chaplain and the bereavement counselor, but most of my experience came in the last 10 to 15 years after I was done at hospice. So I'm going to dive in with a story about one of the first deaths that was significant to me, and that was an old boyfriend named Rudy, who I dated when I was in my 20s. So we had been together a year or two, then parted ways, and then got together again for another year, and then really split up. And about 15 years later, a friend of mine told me that he had died. And I was stunned because he was in his 40s. And so it really kind of hit me, and I was, just wrestling with that, right? And I had a couple of really interesting dreams. So in the first dream, Rudy came to me, and I knew in the dream that he was dead. And he came to me, and we made love multiple times. And I was deeply ambivalent about that, because one, he was cold. He was cold to the touch. He was literally cold. And secondly, we had broken up, and he's just moving back into my life, And then thirdly, I said to him, Rudy, I don't get this. Are you feeling this, what we're doing? Because if you can feel it when you're dead, what's the point? I don't get it. You do it, we feel it when you're alive, you feel it when you're dead. What's the point of being dead? I just was very confused. Does that make sense? So then I had another dream a month or so later in which Chloe's here. Wow. Where Rudy, again, he was dead, but he was walking around just like you or I would walk around. But he was a little bit confused about how to handle being in this other spirit kind of body. And so there was a support group to help him adjust. So now I want to talk about my mom. Chloe, it's so nice to see you. So my mom died in 2015, and she was in a nursing home, which was sad for me and sad for her. So I was with her every day. I spent hours with her every day, and I was there with her the day she died. But no one expected it that day. She definitely was in poor health, but that day she had energy. She was happy. Everything seemed fine. And she may not want me to tell you this part. Anyway, I was with her when she started to slip toward the floor. It wasn't like a fall. It was almost like a leaf falling off a tree. It was like a gentle kind of fall. And I wasn't able to prevent the fall, but I was able to get behind her and cushion her head so that she didn't bump her head. But there she was on the floor. I'm looking down at her, and her eyes are totally vacant. So she was there 1 minute and gone the next. And although I didn't want to quite acknowledge it, and so I ran to tell the nurse, who happened to be right outside. She came and she's yelling, Barb, Barb. No response. So long story short, the nurse suggested I take a walk. And she and the nurse's aides got mom up onto the bed so that she was all presentable, and so I could say goodbye to her. And which I started to do. And then I had this realization, oh, wait. And I ran out of the room and ran down all the halls looking for the nurse until I found her. And I said, please don't call the funeral home yet. Please don't call them yet. Because I had learned from my dad that once you set that in motion, things go very fast. Yeah. So I really want you guys to hear that in case you're ever with someone you love who's dying. Give yourself the gift of time with them, because it's a really sacred time between when they die and you don't want to rush moving them on. When the funeral home comes, they put them on the gurney and they get them out of there. So anyway, after I told the nurse that, I came back and I had some time. And what happened was this spontaneous ritual of love and gratitude. I was just stroking her arms, stroking her hands, like stroking her hair. She loved that kind of touch, that gentle touch. And I just said how grateful I was for all the time she fed me, for tucking me in, for giving me back rubs. Like, she was a good mom. And so I just thanked her and thanked her. So then 3 weeks later, as it happened, it was New Year's Day. And oh, by the way, there are tissues if anybody needs them. At the side of the room, you can find tissues. I'm okay now. I was at the home of my friend Jean, and she had invited women to celebrate New Year's. And it was New Year's Day, and we kind of circled up and, shared what we wanted to do in the coming year. And then we just hang out and talk and eat, as we do. And I was sitting on the couch, and Jean was sitting over there. Now, Jean was a psychic. I went to her many times. And as I was glancing at her, she had a funny expression on her face. And I said, Jean, what's going on? You have such a strange expression on your face. And she said, your mom's behind you, and she's comforting you. Oh. And so that was when I found out Jean was a medium. I didn't know that. So I scheduled an appointment with her, and both my mom and my niece came through. And my niece had died just a few weeks before mom. And so the two stories I want to tell you about mom in that reading is, one, she was so happy. Now, these are my words. She felt all this freedom. So I feel like I have freedom in my life, but I feel like mom did not. That generation, she had 5 kids. She had a husband. She had a big house to take care of. She was involved with the church. It was like so many obligations and responsibilities and so many people to care for. And I think that's typical for most women, don't you? It's just there's so much that we're called to do. And so she didn't really feel like she had much freedom, I don't think. So she was loving being on the other side. There was like this ability to manifest things instantly. So if she thought of this person, there she would be. If she thought of this place, there she would be. If she wanted to look a certain way, she looked that way. So she just loved that. I was happy for her. She was wearing this beautiful red dress. But also she said through Jean that she was very grateful for the time I spent with her after she died. So that was touching to hear. And the reason this story is so important, I think, is because it shows that when we're dead, our consciousness is still alive. She was completely aware. She saw what I was doing. She felt it. She experienced it. Whatever, she knew that I was doing this. So I want you all to remember that death isn't the end. There's a consciousness that lives on. So another related story is my ex-husband, Tom, died this past November. And I loved him. He loved me. We were divorced, but we still loved each other a lot. And I was really grateful that his son told me when he was going downhill so I could be with him in the hospital for his last 2 days. The last day, I didn't expect him to die, just like with mom. He was unconscious, but I had learned as a hospice person what some of the signs are of approaching death, and he wasn't exhibiting any of the other ones. So when Alex called me that night and said that Tom had passed, I was really surprised and sad. And after he and I talked a bit, I called my friend Dave, who was a good friend of Tom's as well, and used to go visit Tom several times a week. Tom was more reclusive as he got older, but Dave just showed up anyway. He would call every day, so they were pretty close. And Dave told me this story. He said, when Tom, I experienced this myself. he was unconscious, but he was a little bit restless. And once in a while, one eye would open just the littlest bit, just the one eye. But it was very vacant. You could tell he wasn't really there, but his eye would open. And whenever it did, Dave would go. Dave was dying to talk with him, and he would go, Tom. And there was no response. And this happened multiple times. I think he didn't realize that when you're unconscious, you can still hear. So he was just desperate. Every time he opened that little eye. So Dave told me when I called to tell him that Tom had passed, he said he already knew. And he said, this must have happened right after he passed, because Tom came to me and he said, so I thought that was so indicative of Tom's sense of humor. It absolutely was totally up his book. So again, Tom was present. He heard what was going on, right? So I want everybody to remember that. A couple of weeks after Tom died, I had another session scheduled with a different medium named Connie, and it was for a different reason. I was very curious about my mom's side of the family, and I brought a picture of my great-grandparents and their 11 adult children. Wow. And there were a few different interesting anomalies with this photograph, and I wanted to get her impressions. I didn't tell her anything about the photo. I just showed it to her. I don't have time to go into those stories, unfortunately, but the second half of the session, I said, I want to see if Tom wants to come through. And he did. And it was so beautiful because even though I couldn't hear what he said, when she would tell me what he was saying, I felt like he was there. And I was talking to him, and I felt like there was a conversation going on. Like his energy was very, very present. His essence was very, very present. So after that session ended, Connie said to me, Cindy, I think Tom's going to need help going to the light. And she said, when is this memorial service? I said, it's actually this Saturday. And she said, okay, wait till after the service. So what I've been told or read is that everybody goes to their memorial service after they die. They're all there. My belief is that it's like the preface to the life review. You get to see how your life impacted other people. So it's really important for you to be there, to see who's there, how did you impact them. So after the memorial service, a day or two later, I did a little ritual to help Tom go to the light. And what I realized retroactively is that I think the reason he needed help was because he didn't believe in an afterlife or a heaven. When we were married, several times I would ask him about his spiritual belief system, and he said, I don't have any. And he was the most beautiful man. I mean, he was kind and wise. He was a great, Kathy's nodding. I mean, everybody who knows him, he was a really good man, but he didn't believe in anything spiritual. So what I learned is that, I think I spoke before that when people die and they've had trauma at the time of death or violence, or if it was sudden, they're going to need help passing on into the light because it was a very sudden death. But the same is true if you don't believe. If you don't believe, it's hard to go somewhere that you don't believe in, right? Mm-hmm. So if someone doesn't believe in an afterlife, they may need our assistance. So I'm just planting that seed in your head. I also learned that one of my great aunts, who was in that picture, had needed help moving on. And the reason was she was carrying shame. She had done something she wasn't proud of, and she was holding on to that. And I think she didn't feel worthy. So we had to help her on too. I want to back up to Rudy just a second, because I feel this is important too. When I lived in the Mount Shasta area, I had a little job with this woman who was a beautiful woman named Linda, a very bright spirit, and she practiced Tibetan Buddhism. She was a devotee of Green Tara. And unfortunately, she was much more sick than she or any of us realized. And While she was in my care, she had to go to the hospital and she died a few days later. The reason I'm bringing up is two of her friends in her Buddhist Sangha were in touch with me about her affairs. And one of them taught me something that I didn't know. She said, one of the reasons Buddhists practice non-attachment is because it helps them at the time of death. She said, if you have attachments to people or places or things like alcohol or drugs, or if you need revenge or there's some lack of closure, these are all attachments that show your inability to let go. And so when you die, you're going to be in the denser realms where those things are, to kind of be with those things that you weren't able to let go of. So, but if you can free yourself of attachments, when you die, you go up to the higher realms. You go up to the realms of light where the teachers are, where you can really evolve more quickly. So I wanted to share that. I feel like maybe Rudy was unresolved with our relationship and he didn't know how to talk to me in waking life, so he came back in the dreams. All right, so I know I need to wrap it up soon. Oh, good. Okay, great. So two more dreams I want to share. Some of you have heard of visitations, right? So some of these dreams I consider visitations. People will come to me after they die. And I was taught that when we're grieving, our vibration is low. It's just a fact of life. It's like we're sad and it's a low vibration, and it's normal and natural. But when a person dies, their spirit is vibrating at a higher energy because they're not bound by gravity anymore. They're in a different realm. So it's harder for them to connect with us when we're grieving. It doesn't mean they don't care about us or love us. It's just, it's a little bit harder to connect. So sometimes they connect with someone who's not as close. And that's what happened to me a few times. Like my neighbor, John, who died. And, you know, we weren't that good friends. We knew each other, but he came to me and he was just in the most vibrant health and just really happy and saying that he was learning and processing. And I passed that on to his mom. Well, the one that really touches my heart is my grandmother came, and I was in England at the time. I was in Cornwall, I believe. And in the dream, I was in a bus. I was sitting in the bus and my cell phone rang, and it was this beautiful chime sound. It was just a gorgeous chime. And something made me turn around and look behind me. And there behind me was my grandmother. And she looked incredible. Her skin was luminous. Her eyes were bright. Her lips were shiny. Her cheeks were rosy. I mean, she was in the most beautiful health. She was wearing this red jacket that was vibrant, and she was so happy, and she was just beaming at me. And I was just overjoyed to see her. And that was all that happened. You know, there was no plot. And just recently I realized, I think there was symbolism in her being behind me. It was like she has my back. And I think she's probably one of my guardian angels. So hi, Grandma. And then the last dream I want to share is not mine, but I think it really wraps things up in a beautiful way. Because this whole topic interests me so much. And by the way, I have a powerful mystical experience that happened after my dad died, but I don't have time to share it. But it is in my book if you're interested, or I can tell you. So I would occasionally go on Facebook and say, if anybody's had a story about something mystical that happened at the time of a friend's death, do if you feel like sharing, please do. And one person said, my cousin's mom died. And my cousin was so bereft. He was just absolutely despondent. He was missing her so badly. And he just was yearning for contact and just so sad. And he was finally given this dream. And I like using that term, given. The dream was given. It was a gift. And in this dream, there was a diner. And the diner was filled to capacity. And in every booth was one person, and on the other side was someone they loved who had died.
Wow.
And throughout the diner, they were all saying essentially the same thing. They were saying, I'm okay, I'm doing well. And I love you. I love you so much. And it's time for me to go. So I leave that with you. What I believe with all my heart is that death is not an ending. It's just this little doorway. There's like this life, then a tiny little doorway, and then this life. And it's all one continuum. And death is just a little spot on that continuum. It's just a shift from this form to that form. The person's energy doesn't die, their consciousness doesn't die. It lives on. And there's just that little transition. And I think our culture doesn't get that very well, but I wanted to share this with you so that hopefully it'll bring you comfort if someone you love passes on. And maybe you can start losing your fear of death too. So thank you, everyone.